Hello, this is an update to the last video I did about The Crew being shut down. A quick recap is Ubisoft is shutting down The Crew at the end of March. That means it will become unplayable by literally everyone. This is one of the largest game shutdowns of this nature, so my plan is to use it to take any and all legal action I can against Ubisoft as a way of challenging the practice of destroying games, period. So even if you don't care about The Crew, I'm using it as a means to an end of trying to halt the practice of companies destroying all future games of this type. I think this is our best shot. The stars are kind of aligned to finally do something about this problem. Now, in the previous video, I reached out for help on this, and the results have been good. Very good so far. I've gotten so much feedback and information to work with that now I have much more defined plans. I feel like I'm 80% there now with what the plans are, though there's still a bunch of work left for me. So this video is to update everyone on what the plans are, get more feedback, and maybe help me shore up some of the weak spots so we can really do this thing full force come April. Oh, unless you're in France and bought a copy of The Crew, in which case you can help a lot as soon as today. I'll get to that. For most people though, we're not going to be doing much until April. This isn't Minority Report. We're not going to be prosecuting future crimes that haven't happened yet. What's happening right now is all research, planning, and prep work, which there's a ton of. Though for non-French owners of The Crew, there's a few steps you can do before April that might help also. Oh boy, there's so much to cover. Some of this is just an update. The rest of this is practically a sequel to my Games as a Service is Fraud video. I'm gonna split this up into two parts: the United States and the rest of the world. I'm going to talk about the rest of the world first, because it's more important to what's happening here, and if I talk about the US first, then people are going to think it's the end times, and that's really not the big picture here. Well, for video games anyway. Alright, so globally, let's talk about the plans. There are a lot of plans, but they're mostly a variation of the same thing. The core problem here is the game is being shut down that people paid for, and the publishing company, in this case Ubisoft, has essentially inserted themselves in between the customer and the game working, and have chosen to abandon that responsibility with no recourse for the customer. Well, in many countries, especially in the European Union and Australia, this is shady to the point of being probably illegal. And lo and behold, many of these countries have robust consumer protection agencies to contact for exactly this kind of situation. So that's the backbone to all of this. We want to get as many people and as many countries as we can to all contact these agencies as soon as The Crew shuts down. Now that may sound kind of mild, but this approach has teeth. Remember how loot boxes got banned in Belgium? That's because people contacted their consumer protection agencies. Or hey, you know how you can refund games on Steam? That's kind of recent. You didn't used to be able to do that. Well, that's thanks to people contacting the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. They sued Valve, which forced them to offer refunds, and the market was forced to adapt. This approach works. Or rather, it has overwhelmingly better odds of working than any other approach I know of. So the way I see it, my job is to organize everyone I can so that in April, as many owners of The Crew as possible can file complaints with all these agencies. And that means I need to make it as easy as possible for everyone with simple instructions of how to do that. And on top of that, get as much publicity as possible so we can reach as many as we can on this. Now, what makes this a pain in the ass for me is every country has a different agency and different procedures. So I need to detail as many as I can and get it translated for the non-English speaking ones. So I need to do this for Australia, but also France, and Germany, and Belgium, and Norway, and Finland, and blah! Oh, and for the EU countries, in addition to national consumer protection agencies, there are also ones for the European Union as well. So the workload on this has been getting a little insane, but I'll do it. I am going all in on this. I want us to hit on all fronts that we can. My goal here is to try everything I can to end the practice of destroying games. And this is the best shot I've ever had to do so I better take it. Then, once I've done all the research on how the whole damn world can contact their consumer protection agencies, or at least a big chunk of the world, I'll get an easy-to-access multilingual website set up that will walk everyone in every country covered through the process. I may make a how-to video for each country also, just in case. Although this isn't going to be every country, just ones that have a sizable market and strong enough consumer laws to potentially do some damage. And once that is set up, then come either late March or definitely April, I'm going to try and raise as much publicity as I can on this. Besides making a short and to the point video here, I will reach out to any relevant YouTube channel, media source, whatever, that I can to try and promote this action. I'll be able to keep the message simple. And that message is, if you own a copy of The Crew, you can go to the website, which will have an easy to remember name, which I'll reveal later. It will tell you exactly what to do for the country you live in. You file the complaint, boom, you're done. You may have just saved gaming as we know it. So that's the core plan. But wait, I said I'm going all in, and I mean that. So that means looking at bonus options also. Now these will vary by country, but in talking to people who emailed me, one person said something that stood out to me. We were talking about the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, and he said they won't pay much attention to individual complaints, even if they get a lot of them on the same issue. But a law firm contacting them with a formal complaint might. So in addition to getting people in Australia to contact the ACC, I'm looking into the possibility of getting a law practice to file a complaint with them in a professional capacity. That will cost money, but since they're just filing a complaint, that shouldn't be anywhere near the cost of a full lawsuit. So maybe I or we can swing that. I'll see. But then that got me thinking, what about other countries? Is this just an Australian thing? Or we're doing the same thing in France, Germany, etc. help out also? I don't know. I need to figure that out. And speaking of which, another bonus option I'm considering is the vast majority of my audience is English speaking. But some of the countries with the strongest consumer laws are not. Their complaints could count a lot more than those of most English speakers. So it might not hurt to reach out to gaming YouTubers who speak different languages, like French or German especially. Additionally, if it's not too much and they were cool with it, maybe in April I could pay some of them to do a PSA in one of their videos to talk about this. It could be 10 seconds. They would just need to tell their audience if they own a copy of The Crew to go to the website I'll have set up for easy instructions in their own language on how to act on this. That might help us get a lot more action than we would otherwise. And that kind of brings me to the weak spots. The plan is not complete. Here are the weak spots I'm seeing so far. The first I just mentioned. Will a law practice filing a complaint with the Consumer Protection Agency carry more weight in countries besides Australia? If so, which ones? And can you assist me in getting in touch with a lawyer in that country who could do this? Maybe get a price estimate, that sort of thing. The second is, while I'm compiling instructions for every country, some I've received more help on than others. This is going to become dated as soon as I post this video, but here's roughly where I am at the moment. There's a few issues we need to improve here. The first is, due to the number of countries involved, I've been trying to delegate research to native residents of each country whenever possible. Because if the country's language isn't English, and most of them aren't, that automatically puts residents in a better position to research than me. However, not everyone has reached out, so we have a lot of gaps still. If your country isn't listed here, it either means I haven't received any help on it and I haven't had time to research it myself yet, or else the consumer laws where you live are likely too weak to be able to make much of an impact. It's probably just me needing more help though. I will appreciate any and all help along these lines. Even if your country is listed here, I would rather 5 people give me redundant information than not have enough info. That's normally not true with me, but in this case, more is better. Any European Union country I do not have listed here automatically means I simply need more info on what the procedures are. There is no reason not to have as many EU residents as possible participate in this, since EU laws can have some punch in this area. As for other countries, the 2 big ones I don't have here that may help are Canada and Brazil. I have no idea how strong either of those countries' consumer protection laws are. They're certainly big markets. If I get the info on what to do, or if I have time later to research it, they'll be added to the list. Since I have limited time, I'm trying to prioritize where we'll have the most impact. That's determined by strength of existing consumer laws, then game market size. I think the most important countries in this will be France, Germany, and Australia. And the EU as kind of an amorphous blob where smaller countries probably won't tip the scales by themselves, but collectively they add up. Oh, and the United Kingdom may be screwed. Someone was researching it and contacted the Advertising Standards Authority, and they said they have no jurisdiction and we would have to take this up with France. But maybe they could pass along the complaints? So everyone in the UK may be utterly and entirely powerless on this issue. I'm not sure. Stuff like this is why I'm making this video, so we can get some course corrections if anyone out there knows better what to do in all these situations. Because statistically, somebody does. Now this isn't as simple as just finding the Consumer Protection Agency and pointing people to a URL. I need to make this as close to a red carpet experience for anyone filing a complaint about the crew in April. That means having easy, step-by-step instructions everywhere we can. And also navigating all the subtleties of these different agencies ahead of time, so we're not sending people into dead ends or traps. For example, in Denmark, there's the Forbrugerklagenævnet, which could cover this situation, but the item has to have been purchased within 3 years and be worth at least about $158. Well, nobody paid that for the crew, and most buyers weren't in the past few years, so that's a complete dead end. So should I direct Danish people to the European Consumer Center instead? I'm not sure. That's just one example of dozens of situations like this. We need to blaze a trail for everyone, so complaining about Ubisoft to the correct authorities could not be easier in April. Even if we hit a dead end, knowing we have is useful information, because that means we should redirect our time elsewhere. Exhausting options is the name of the game. I just want to hammer every angle I can until it's a verified dead end or something goes through. And the final weak spot I'm seeing is I am not the master of publicity. It's dumb luck I have as large of an audience as I do. I've always prioritized trying to make my videos halfway decent over getting maximum exposure. I mean, hell, I still need to update thumbnails on my old videos. A lot of those were just automatically generated by YouTube. I've never liked having to do that crap. It's just sort of a necessary evil for me. But for once, this is a situation where I need attention on this. Just because I'll be trying to reach out to every channel I can on this in April, that doesn't mean I'll necessarily be the most effective. If media attention is your thing, maybe you have ideas on how we can get more publicity on this issue. And yes, I know this video is long, it isn't the most attention grabbing, but I'll have very short and clear messages on this for April. Plus, I don't need max publicity right now. I need it in a month and a half. Now, I may as well act as a spokesperson for the topic of destroying games, since I haven't seen anyone else step up to the same degree. But this doesn't even have to involve me. The important part is just getting people who own the crew to file a complaint with their agency come April. Though the caveat here, and I guess this is some foreshadowing, is European and Australian audiences are the priority. American ones, while they can help, maybe, are going to be way less valuable for this effort. So you need to go all Euro and Aussie on your promotion to maximize our chances. Anyway, if you think you can help with anything I've mentioned, please contact me. Don't assume I have everything taken care of. I'll be trying my best here, but this is a global campaign, so it'd be nice to have more hands on deck. A quick recap, this is the stuff I could use the most help with. Now, not everyone's going to be able to help with this, but if you can, you might be what makes the difference between this being successful or not. We don't know. Remember, the crew is just the vessel for taking action here. If we have even a few victories, that could literally stop almost all games in the future from being destroyed. So let's try to do it right. And on that note, while the main push is in April, there are some things owners of the crew can do now. First, let's start with France. France almost has too many options for where to take this. It's a bit overwhelming. However, perhaps the most powerful one is French citizens can summon a legal mediator if companies refuse to resolve problems with them. It was added recently as a measure to prevent companies from walking all over people. This potentially has so much power. Unfortunately, it also involves a few steps and could result in up to 2 months lag time, hence why I'm encouraging people to start on this now. So here's a guide I've collaborated with for the first step. You simply need to write an official letter to Ubisoft expressing your complaint. Now, of course, Ubisoft will just tell you to go pound sand, but this is a necessary step for summoning the mediator who will have some legal power over this. So here, I'll walk you through the directions. Unfortunately in English. I had 2 years of French in high school, yet I've forgotten almost every single thing. Je ne parle pas français. Okay, first, this is only for people who still have a proof of purchase for the crew. Sorry. Next, write a letter to Ubisoft, but be sure to hit these points here. Your full name, date of when you purchased the game, and for how much. Tell them you learned about Ubisoft's plans to make the crew unusable starting in April. You find this surprising and completely unacceptable. Say it is surprising, this will help our legal stance. Even if you're as cynical as I am, technically that's not a lie. I mean, nobody really knew if it was going to shut down until December 14th. Say that you find this a violation of your consumer rights, and it might not hurt to mention the Code de la Consommation. Say you want the game updated or fixed so that Ubisoft support is no longer necessary. And finally, say that if you do not get a satisfactory answer, you will be contacting a mediator about this. Then you can go ahead and mail it at this address. Hopefully you can navigate the options to mail it. Oh, and since it's registered mail, this will cost 6.6 euros. But if you email me a copy of your receipt showing you mailed it, just ask and I will personally reimburse you. You will not have to spend anything on this. Additionally, if Ubisoft ghosts you and doesn't send a reply, I can also send you a reminder after 2 months, so you won't have to remember anything either. I'll cover all the next steps later on and on the website I'll launch. Mailing Ubisoft is the important step for now. Do this and we'll be on our way to getting something done. Okay, so that's France for now. But there's a couple things other owners of the game can do to prepare for April. The first is contact Ubisoft and tell them you would like to continue running the game after March. Now, you know and I know this is pointless, but government bureaucracies do not know this, so we need to do it. First, you will have to log into your Ubisoft account. This address will vary depending on your language and region. The crew, select your platform, information and troubleshooting. I went with technical issues, I guess general information would work too. Then tell them you heard about the shutdown and you want to know how you can play the game without their support starting in April. They'll either email you later telling you you can't, or they just won't reply at all and you'll get an automatic message saying they got it. Either way, save that email response and hold on to it. Because this is proof you tried to resolve the problem with Ubisoft, but they're being jackasses. You may need it in April when you contact your consumer protection agency. Hey, I've got mine. And the last thing you can do that may help, I'm not sure yet, is even if you don't have a receipt for the game, just make some proof you own the crew. This could be a photo of a disc, or a screenshot of your account name and the crew in it. You don't need to send me this, just hold on to it just in case. They may disappear the game from your account later, who knows? And that about does it for now, for the international plans. I can say that if we keep up this momentum, especially in April, that by the end of this, Ubisoft will notice this on some level. I'm convinced this is the route towards any hope of us stopping companies from killing games. I would not be doing this if I didn't see an opening here. You're going to get my absolute best effort on this. I really think we have a decent shot. So let's do this and get ready for April. And with that framing in mind, now let's talk about the United States. Oh my. What do I say here? Well, I've learned a lot recently. I guess let's start with what happened since the last video. One person was able to get me in touch with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It turns out they never got my emails. Go figure. They said they wouldn't be able to help, but then refer me to some attorneys who were also not able to help. Half of them didn't reply. One kind of told me what I already knew, but gave it to me straight. And I won't name names here, but one was actually a little worse than not helping at all. Since in the first email, they said, it's only partly a EULA problem. There are a host of other options for avid gamers to pursue keeping the game alive. A host of other options. Really? So me, wondering what the hell they were talking about, drilled down only to find out, no, they just made that up. And by the third email, I got a different line. There really are not any good answers to this problem. Yeah. I told you guys, false optimism is a pet peeve of mine. But lo and behold, I had a much better lead contact me just from watching the last video. Martin, the Florida lawyer. Martin dislikes this practice almost as much as I do and is personally motivated on it. Now, originally, he had a great plan to not do a class action suit since the scope of those are too large, but instead simply get one really solid client affected by the crew shutdown, so the only damages will be for $60 or whatever they paid for it, then use that case to establish a precedent. Moreover, since he had an axe to grind, he was willing to take a shot at it for $15,000 and do the rest on contingency, knowing he would lose money on this. Now that sounds like a lot, and it is for most of us, but for a lawsuit, that is a bargain. That's like being able to buy a house for $15,000. And more importantly, that's a target we might have been able to fundraise for. Well, after talking with him, Martin did some more digging on his own initiative. He said he spent about a quarter of the day on this and ended up researching a lot of legal information for us. The bad news is that canceled his plans. I'll try to boil down why best I can. First off, I got some things wrong. In my Games as a Services fraud video a few years back, I still stand by pretty much everything I said there, except for the United States. I know now that I completely face-planted on that. Now, some people tried to tell me this back then, or even now, but the thing is, nobody backed it up. Well, one guy halfway did. I'll get to that in a bit. I talked to half a dozen lawyers, maybe 100 or so emails. Nobody told me the court case that established the precedent for this. Martin did. See, if I'm doubtful of something, I need the evidence to prove I'm wrong. Remember a few years back when everyone was getting sued by Warner Brothers for using the Happy Birthday song, and it was common knowledge that they owned the rights to it? Turns out they didn't, and they're being fined $14 million for doing that. That's why verifying this crap is important. So I'm going to explain my new understanding of US law and games as a service the way I would if I was trying to convince myself from a few years back if I traveled back in time. I may still get some details wrong, but it's going to be a hell of a lot more accurate than before. Okay, so in that video, I talked about the distinction between a perpetual license and a subscription license. That still is an important distinction, but that's more of a big deal in other countries. See, the United States also has do whatever the hell you want licenses, which is what games as a service generally use. Now, the court case that really laid the mold for all this that frigging nobody told me about, or if they did, I really missed it, was Procedy versus Zeidenberg. The details aren't that important for me, but the important part is this is what established the law that largely governs software, where a lot of it gets handled by the Uniform Commercial Code, and it likes to defer to the end-user license agreement for almost everything. Now, there is some gray area here. I got that partially right, but it's not in a way that's helpful at all. Like, some gray area is whether software is considered a good or a service. That can vary. Also, on whether you're entitled to a refund within about 90 days of purchasing the software. There's some other complications too, but guess what? Ownership of your copy of the game is not one of them. The people saying you own nothing are correct. In the United States. Even if you have a physical copy of the game, under US law, all you own is the literal piece of plastic, not any of the data on it itself. If the EULA said you're not allowed to run the game anymore, then continuing to run the game would technically be illegal. Now obviously, this kind of clashes with reality, since in real-world terms, of course you own a lot of your games. But under the law, you own nothing. Here, I need to dig up that old chart I made. I got this part all wrong. For the United States. Forget games as a service, do you own your game? I'm dividing this up between a game that has DRM that can't be circumvented, like The Crew, versus DRM that can be circumvented or no DRM at all. Okay, that clears it up. So yes, in real world terms, you probably own a lot of games. But in every legal capacity, Americans own nothing. Now, I am simplifying a bit. I say you own nothing, but it's all dependent on the end-user license agreement. I'm not aware of any off the top of my head, but I could believe there are EULAs out there that explicitly state that you own your copy of the game. Maybe Tux Racer? I don't know, I'm just guessing. What I do know is I'm betting about 0% of games as a service have EULAs that let you own your game. So for the United States, I got it wrong. I said games as a service is fraud. No, that's incorrect. In order for it to be fraud, you need to have rights. I should have titled it, Games as a Service is not fraud because you have no rights. You mostly haven't since 1999, and you probably never will if you're in the USA. I guess that's a little wordy. But yeah, there's no fraud taking place if there are no rights. See, my confusion was I was looking at this from a consumer rights perspective, between a buyer and a seller. But that framing was all wrong. Under the law, it's more like we're animals. You can't defraud an animal, like a squirrel out in your yard. Under the law, it doesn't have any ownership rights either. I said before that EULAs are not legal documents, and while that's still technically true, they may as well be in the US. See, EULAs are a magical playground where companies can do just about anything they want if you install the software. Now, what I said about EULAs not being able to supersede actual laws is also true, but there's a very wide berth that the US gives license agreements. So it has to be really extreme before that kicks in. There is nothing about being able to own what you buy to supersede this. So they have a 6 ways to Sunday. The way Martin explained it to me is they could add a provision that they're allowed to kill your dog. And then when they came and killed your dog, you could try to fight that in court, but you would be on the defensive. The judge would not immediately press charges against Ubisoft as dog killers. Instead, you would have to try to make the case in court that the dog killing provision of your EULA went a bit too far and may run afoul of animal cruelty laws. So you would have to defend yourself of getting out of that provision of the contract. Not that the company would automatically be in violation of the law. And from the last video, remember that bit about some EULAs being unconscionable? Well, even if every court in the US agreed with that about not being able to own your games, it still wouldn't help, because that wouldn't compel Ubisoft or other companies to not destroy the game. At best, it would mean you're simply allowed to try to run the game after they kill it, which would still be almost impossible due to the encryption. You could win every court case on unconscionability and it would do absolutely nothing for preservation of games. Martin had a few good quotes on this. This cannot be solved by a lawsuit. It has to be an act of Congress. The case law is bad. The precedent is bad. It is only video games where you have this hyper level of anti-consumerism. He also found a great reference if you want more reading on this. Rated M for Misleading is a short essay written by another pro-gaming lawyer detailing how bad the situation is. Now, this guy was focused more on the problems with pre-ordering and new releases, but it overlaps with the parts I'm most concerned with. And he backs up the law regarding this and puts it in plain English as to what the problem is. I'll link to it in the description. He has a lot of good quotes too. Video game publishers and developers will never have the reason, incentive, or motivation to market, build, and support a video game properly the first time around. No other American industry is given this much room to mislead consumers and then avoid responsibility for its mistakes. The solutions to the issues discussed in this article are not complicated. Congress must tackle the issue and provide consumers an additional method of protection. And courts should re-examine how they analyze EULAs. Now, this doesn't mean it's literally impossible to fight this in the US courts, but it's about as close as you can get. Since Martin's original plan got tanked, he was still trying to come up with legal gymnastics angles, like finding someone who bought the Crew but didn't install it, hence not agreeing to the EULA. Then, if the plaintiff refused to accept the cash refund and demanded he receive the product sold, he might be able to have a case in that. But that sounds like such a long shot. And it's the sort of thing I would think a judge would be tempted to throw out as being frivolous, because in a vacuum, it kind of is. It's just the law has shut down every other avenue for trying to own a copy of a game you paid for. There are just no legal options. And if you need further convincing, while Pro CD versus Zeidenberg is not federal law, it became the law in its district, and every other district in the US positively referenced it. So it's effectively the law of the land now. So in theory, you could take this to the Supreme Court, but I'm going to save time and not explain why the odds of that being successful are so astronomically low, and instead just say that you probably have better odds of getting hit by a meteorite. So I'm about ready to declare the concept of game ownership fully and utterly dead under the legal system of the United States. And to be fair, I did a search through all my emails. There is literally one person who tried to tell me all this and back it up. He did not mention Pro CD versus Zeidenberg, but he did send me this document which had more legalese than my mind was processing at the time. And boom, there it is. Pro CD versus Zeidenberg in the footnotes. I wasn't enough of a lawyer to pick up on that, so I missed it. Oops. In my defense, that video has received over 1 million views, and only one person halfway told me about this case. So the basis for this was not common knowledge, even among lawyers. It is sheer dumb luck we received pro bono, high-quality research from an expensive lawyer to clear this up. I wouldn't have thought I would have been even able to afford this information. And yes, this sucks. But one of my lesser goals with trying to have a lawsuit was to lift the fog on the law regarding game ownership, because I thought it was a gray area. Well, mission accomplished. There's no gray area on this that matters. We own nothing. Even now, it feels schizophrenic talking about this, because objective reality is we own lots of games, but the law is saying we don't. Like, if you have an apple in your hand and take a bite out of it, but then a lawyer or a judge says you're not allowed to own apples, you're simply being allowed access to them? Okay, yeah, that's not crazy at all.
My milk! Give it.
Really, what we're seeing is companies finding ways to enforce their dreams of non-ownership, which largely weren't possible in the past. Now they are. Wonderful. Ironically, I'm not even sure if non-subscription always online games even existed when this ruling was made. So this is kind of like restricting air travel laws before the balloon was invented. It's such bad law, and it was already set by the time I was in high school. Maybe before some of you were even born. Well, again, sorry I got all this so wrong in my Games as a Services fraud video. I did try. I thought we had rights. My bad. I didn't mean to take everyone down this rabbit hole, including myself. I'll try to make up for it by having the biggest campaign I'm aware of to internationally stop games from being destroyed in April. So, since under US law we're basically animals, where do we go from here? Well, I'm only seeing 2 possibilities left for the United States before I declare it hopeless, and only one of them involves not being a millionaire. So there's really only one option left to try before we're checkmated. I am not giving this good odds at all, but I really can't see any downside to trying it either. We'll do what I'm trying to get done globally, which is contact our Consumer Protection Agency come April. In this case, the FTC. This is a long shot, but I don't see this as impossible. Martin did mention a case where the FTC sued Sony for false advertising on the Vita, but considering how that was hardware, I'm still not too hopeful. I mean, on some physical copies of The Crew, it does say expires January 1st, 2099, but that could also be a dead end. Because not only did it not say that on digital copies, but I'm guessing if they did get fined for that, then the only thing that would come of it would be they simply don't put that label on games in the future. So that would still do nothing to save games. I don't care about fining Ubisoft for its own sake. I only want fines if they directly lead to action preventing future games from being destroyed. And I don't think that 2099 label will do that by itself. Anyway, Martin says there are certain points I can coach people on that will make the FTC pay more attention to this than the average complaint would otherwise. I'll be sure to go over those later once I get them. So we may as well take our shot in April just to close the book on this. If we give our best effort to contact the FTC, and I think we'll be able to get a few hundred people, but absolutely nothing comes from that, then we will know the issue of preventing games from being destroyed is impossible under US law. Then I will have learned my lesson and cease pursuing any legal efforts on games in the US whatsoever because it is utterly hopeless for animals like us. God bless America. However, the other option which could work, but I'm not even considering because it's simply unaffordable, is lobbying. Maybe I'm too cynical, but my perception is that laws get changed based on what interests with money want in the United States, not by popular demand. That's just a coincidence when that happens. There is that famous Princeton study on Congress that kind of agrees with me. So that means it's not literally impossible to change this, but it is impossible for anyone who isn't a millionaire or else has serious inroads with millionaires to fund it. So that might happen eventually, but it won't be because of anything I'm doing or can influence. It's kind of like trying to predict when an earthquake is going to be. It could be soon, it could be never. I mean, if there are any Scrooge McDucks out there who do want that to happen, I won't turn them away, but I'm not making any plans on that. I don't plan my life around winning the lottery either. And speaking of funds, I'm undecided if there will be a fundraiser now, since the main expense was going to be hiring a US lawyer, but Martin from Florida just saved us a hell of a lot of money on that front. It all depends on if we have enough activities to warrant having one, and it's pretty much all going to be for activity outside of the US. So far I have potentially paying for an Australian lawyer, and maybe paying for some mentions on German and French gaming channels, all of which are still up in the air at the moment. I'm still willing to fund several hundred of this out of pocket, but I need more details. I won't have any fundraiser unless I know about how much we need and exactly where it's going. So again, feel free to give feedback if you know how to best allocate something like that. So that is where things stand in the US. As you can see, things look so much more promising on this issue abroad than in the United States, where it couldn't be much worse. But remember, we don't need a win in the US to win this war. We just need to make it more expensive to destroy games in other countries than not. Now, I would end it here, but since it's an update video, I wanted to follow up on a few things before I go. The first thing, I've said this before, but there's a particular comment about what I'm doing that keeps popping up like some sort of weed. Feel free to timestamp this part if you see it again. I've seen comments before of people saying something like, "This is ridiculous. You can't expect companies to keep running the servers forever." Let me be really clear here, guys. I am not now, nor have I ever advocated for that in any way. I think what's happening is the propaganda from the industry has been so effective that younger people literally don't understand how aspects of games work now. So let's go over this quick. I think the problem is some people see an online-only game and only see two options. The first is to host the game forever. Yeah, that is unreasonable and unrealistic. I agree. So the only other option they see is shut down the game forever. Well, if that's your entire worldview for online games, option 2 sucks, but it's the only realistic option, right? Oh, but wait, what's this? What's this? Option 3. Patch the game to enable local hosting. This is what I'm advocating for. I honestly don't blame younger people for not knowing this option exists. It's how the majority of online games work from the 90s to the mid-2000s. When a company does this, the game is safe forever. You know how Epic delisted and shut down the servers for a lot of the Unreal Tournament games a year ago? Well, Unreal Tournament, 2003, 2004, have had their central servers shut down, have no more support from the company, and yet you can still play them all online with other people today. I know, this is witchcraft to a few of you. Now you might be saying, yeah, but those are small arena games with only up to 64 people. True, but hey, remember how Blizzard released World of Warcraft Classic? That's because so many people were illicitly hosting an entire MMO, because a server emulator was made for the game and was so popular it was giving them actual competition. So people have been privately hosting games with thousands of players online at the same time on their own without any intervention from the company for years. Except for really fringe scenarios, it's just propaganda to think that companies can't let people do this anytime they want. For some games, doing this is a very easy transition. For others, it's much harder, but that's all the publisher choice. And it's all kind of irrelevant because they're always just excuses. Allowing the customer to host the game when support ends is such a fundamental aspect of an online game that it honestly feels insane to me when people don't understand this. Hey, you know what else is important to a game? You know how a lot of games want you to press a button to start? Most people agree that is important to work. What if you pressed a button and nothing happened? Would you accept excuses from companies that they couldn't fix that? No? But wait, what if they said it was a lot of work to fix that because of how they coded the game and they weren't lying? Then would you accept their excuses? Or would you just call them a bunch of clowns? It's the exact same principle, guys, just coming from the other end. I'm sure people will make that comment again in the future about me wanting companies to run their servers forever, but hopefully this beats it back a little bit. Oh, and I'm only giving a free pass to younger people saying that, because if all you've ever played is Fortnite or Roblox, then yeah, you wouldn't know this. But if you're in your mid-30s or older making comments like that, then you're a clown and should know better. Not that I have a problem with clowns per se, but do you have to clown this hard and right here? Maybe you do. Alright, just a couple more things. I realized after the previous video, when comparing the Crew to the Crew 2, the Crew 2 actually removed content. Yeah, somebody made a comparison video showing entire small towns disappearing from the original game. Wow, that sucks. So I think that means the Crew is still the second largest driving game ever made, since it has more to drive on than the sequel. Oh, and on that City Synth video I showed last time, some didn't understand that this was generated from 2D footage. This is why I'm so optimistic on AI. Because yeah, we might really be able to rip assets from video effectively on the scale the Crew needs in the future. And by coincidence, I recently ran into a project where somebody recreated some Need for Speed 3 tracks inside Unreal. This is kind of what I've been talking about. Now I'm assuming this didn't have any AI involved, he probably just ported assets straight out of the original game. So think this, except using AI to rip assets from the game or even just from footage. If we were to fail on every legal front internationally, then stuff like this will literally be the only option left for game preservation. We're on a weird timeline. Okay, that's it for now. I'll have another update later if it's needed. Otherwise, we're gonna hit back on this in April. The question is how hard? Let's make it hard. See ya. Wait a minute, Minecraft supports private servers. Okay, I take back what I said. Young people don't have an excuse to not know about local hosting. None of you have an excuse. You should all know better. The end.